This is an ABC News special.
It is you, our citizens, who make the state of our union strong.
Tonight, the eyes of the world are on Washington.
I promised that 2014 would be a breakthrough year for America.
But it was also a year of anger and frustration here at home.
Pass a bill. Nobody is stopping them from passing a bill.
And overseas.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
Now, with only 2 years remaining,
Interesting stuff happens in the fourth quarter.
the president makes his case.
America is coming back.
From the nation's capital, the State of the Union, and the Republican response. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening and welcome to an important night here in Washington. You are looking live at the Capitol. That's the House chamber where America's leaders are gathered tonight for President Obama's second to last State of the Union. 6 years ago today, he took the oath for the first time. The country suffering its deepest economic crisis since the Depression, Democrats in control of Congress. And tonight, for the first time, he'll face a Congress where Republicans are in charge, both the House and the Senate. They are in emboldened opposition after that big midterm win. The GOP's eyes now set on the White House. But the president emboldened too, determined to make the most of his final 2 years. As he said, with or without Congress, and he takes the podium tonight with a bit of wind at his back. Thanks to a rising economy, lower gas prices, his approval rating now 50%, the highest in 18 months. Our political team on hand to analyze what we'll see and hear tonight, and ABC senior White House correspondent Jonathan Karl inside the House chamber. And John, when it comes to the economy tonight, no hedging from the president. He's going to declare victory over this great recession.
That's for sure, George. This is going to really be a triumphant speech, which is amazing because he's coming in after his party was trounced in the midterm elections. He's going to be looking out at a chamber with many more Republican faces than Democratic faces. But when he looks at the economy, he sees an economy that is at its strongest of his presidency. So you're going to see a little bit of an I told you so theme here. You know, Republicans had predicted dire consequences as a result of his policies, especially on Obamacare. But he's going to say, look, the president, the verdict is in. My policies worked.
And ABC political analyst Matthew Daddis, we keep our eye on the chamber. Everyone gathered there waiting for the sergeant at arms to announce the president. That is really the president's big job tonight, to own the recovery, convince people that he should get some credit for it.
Yeah, I think his main imperative is to sell the rise, to sell the movement that has happened in the last 2 months. He's seen the American public go from somewhat unhappy to somewhat happy. He needs them to go from, I think the economy is doing well, to them knowing the economy is doing well. That's really what he has to get out of the speech, that he convinces the American public the economy is really on the move.
We see there, right there, Senator Lindsey Graham, who just announced on Sunday he might want to run for president himself coming up in 2016. A few possible candidates in the chamber. Senators Ted Cruz from Texas, Marco Rubio from Florida as well. And Nicole Wallace, of course, you worked for President George W. Bush, worked on a lot of states of the union. This document is also going to set the stage for that campaign, even though President Obama not running.
That's right. And I think, you know, we talk about him selling this economy. It was on the market 60 days ago, and the results of the midterms were abysmal. He's standing in a room with more Republicans in it than have been in that room in, I think, 80 years. So I think Republicans are justified in viewing both the substance and the tone of tonight's speech with a hefty deal of skepticism.
And Democrats, Donna Brazile, not nearly as many as were there when the president first addressed the Congress 6 years ago.
That's correct, George. Democrats had a very bad election year, but they're going to rally around the president to expand opportunities for the middle class and to focus on an economy that works for everyone.
Cokie Roberts?
I think that really that last election is what this speech is about, and the next election, because that last election, a lot of people think the Democrats didn't run on the themes they should have. And those themes were expanding opportunities for the middle class, saying, yes, the economy is getting better, but not for you. And we have to do things to make it better for you. This speech is all about making it better for the middle class and setting the groundwork for 2016, because he has lost 70, almost tomorrow, 70 Democrats in the Congress and scores around the country.
But there will also be some foreign policy. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz also up on Capitol Hill. The president going to ask for an authorization of military force against ISIS.
And that tells you, George, how long and sustained a battle this will be. The White House has said before they didn't think they needed that AUMF, but tonight they will say they do. It will be a signal of unity, they believe, with other nations. A year ago, as we stood here, George, the president said all of our troops are out of Iraq. Tonight, we have thousands of ground troops, more than 2,000 ground troops, and of course, thousands in the air. We have carried out 1,900 airstrikes against ISIL, or ISIS, as we call it, in Syria and Iraq.
And now the president wants Congress to get behind it as well. Let's keep our eyes on the chamber right now. We're told the president right behind those doors, waiting to be announced by the House Sergeant of Arms, Paul Irving. Just moments ago, of course, here comes the Sergeant at Arms now.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
President joined by an escort committee from the House and the Senate. See the House Republican Whip Kevin McCarthy right behind him, the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell behind him, and of course Nancy Pelosi, the House Democratic leader. Those members of Congress, Cokie Roberts, have been lining up there for hours trying to save those seats on the aisle.
For hours, and it is always mysterious that they feel that that's so important to be seen on television greeting the president, particularly since some of them don't like the president very much. But they do that, and some of them have now been tweeting out tips.
Let's see if we can listen and hear what the president's saying to people he's greeting. Of course, there's the First Lady, Michelle Obama, surrounded by some hand-picked guests as well. Many have written letters to the president over the year describing their challenges and triumphs in this economy. Eliot Engel, I think for the last 26 years, there you see him, the congressman from New York City, has been right on that aisle seat without fail.
Since yesterday.
Yeah. President Bush used to talk about people who he'd see on the shows criticizing everything he did as president, but they were usually the first ones online for their seats.
And Donna, the president, looking forward, I think all presidents do, by the time they get to this chamber, this is their chance to own the moment and really lay out what they want to do for the country.
You know, George, I've been over to the White House many times over the last 2 weeks. They've been really focused on how the president can really try to talk about his accomplishments, talk about the things that he wants to do in the last 2 years of his presidency, and really reach out to people in those so-called red states. You know, he's been to Kentucky recently, Tennessee, and he's on his way to Idaho.
We just saw the president greet Senator Barbara Boxer, outgoing retiring senator, Democrat from California. Most of the president's cabinet is there, one standing back. They're called a designated survivor every year. This year, it is Anthony Foxx, the Secretary of Transportation. He's been Secretary of Transportation since July 2013, only 43 years old, former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. Generally, the designated survivor gets out of Washington, D.C. We'll find out in coming days where he did go.
George, I was going to say, one thing, he has some things to celebrate over, but I think it's his tone. He needs to have some humility in this speech, even though things are going well. A majority of the country still thinks we're off on the wrong track, and he has to acknowledge that.
We just saw the president greeting members of the court, Elena Kagan, one of his appointees, as well. And John Carl, I want to come to you with that. The court holding a big part of the president's agenda in their hands this year, deciding whether or not to invalidate the subsidies which are at the core of his health care, Obamacare.
With a decision in that case, George, the Supreme Court really holds Obamacare in the balance. If they knock down those subsidies, there are 36 states that would be ineligible for health care subsidies to help people buy health care under Obamacare. That effectively guts the law.
The president approaching the podium right now. Of course, you see Speaker Boehner there, and the Vice President, Joe Biden. The gavel should come down any moment. I see the president doing a lot of greeting right there. Take your
And these are the staffers of the House of Representatives, the people, the parliamentarian, the clerk, the people who work for both parties and work for the American people and never get any recognition at all. It's nice that the president's doing it.
Thank you. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Another big round of applause right there. Nicole, I remember your boss, George W. Bush, would try to hurry right to that text at this moment.
Yeah, we'd work so hard on those applause lines, and he'd try to talk right through them so that he could, not drag it out. But some people like it more than others.
President Clinton enjoyed it. He enjoyed it.
He did.
Very much.
But this is such a moment.
Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans. We are 15 years into this new century. 15 years that dawned with terror touching our shores, that unfolded with a new generation fighting two long and costly wars, that saw a vicious recession spread across our nation and the world. It has been and still is a hard time for many. But tonight, we turn the page. Tonight, after a breakthrough year for America, our economy is growing and creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999. Our unemployment rate is now lower than it was before the financial crisis. More of our kids are graduating than ever before. More of our people are insured than ever before. And we are as free from the grip of foreign oil as we've been in almost 30 years. Tonight, for the first time since 9/11, our combat mission in Afghanistan is over. Six years ago, nearly 180,000 American troops served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, fewer than 15,000 remain. And we salute the courage and sacrifice of every man and woman in this 9/11 generation who has served to keep us safe. We are humbled and grateful for your service. America, for all that we have endured, for all the grit and hard work required to come back, for all the tasks that lie ahead, know this: the shadow of crisis has passed, and the state of the union is strong. At this moment, with a growing economy, shrinking deficits, bustling industry, booming energy production, we have risen from recession freer to write our own future than any other nation on earth. It's now up to us to choose who we want to be over the next 15 years and for decades to come. Will we accept an economy where only a few of us do spectacularly well? Or will we commit ourselves to an economy that generates rising incomes and chances for everyone who makes the effort? Will we approach the world fearful and reactive, dragged into costly conflicts that strain our military and set back our standing? Or will we lead wisely, using all elements of our power to defeat new threats and protect our planet? Will we allow ourselves to be sorted into factions and turned against one another? Or will we recapture the sense of common purpose that has always propelled America forward? In 2 weeks, I will send this Congress a budget filled with ideas that are practical, not partisan. And in the months ahead, I'll crisscross the country making a case for those ideas. So tonight, I want to focus less on a checklist of proposals and focus more on the values at stake in the choices before us. It begins with our economy. 7 years ago, Rebecca and Ben Earler of Minneapolis were newlyweds. She waited tables, he worked construction. Their first child, Jack, was on the way. They were young and in love in America. And it doesn't get much better than that. If only we had known, Rebecca wrote to me last spring, what was about to happen to the housing and construction market. As the crisis worsened, Ben's business dried up. So he took what jobs he could find, even if they kept him on the road for long stretches of time. Rebecca took out student loans and enrolled in community college and retrained for a new career. They sacrificed for each other. And slowly it paid off. They bought their first home. They had a second son, Henry. Rebecca got a better job and then a raise. Ben's back in construction and home for dinner every night. It is amazing, Rebecca wrote, what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. America, Rebecca and Ben's story is our story. They represent the millions who've worked hard and scrimped and sacrificed and retooled. You are the reason that I ran for this office. You are the people I was thinking of 6 years ago today, in the darkest months of the crisis, when I stood on the steps of this Capitol and promised we would rebuild our economy on a new foundation. And it has been your resilience, your effort, that has made it possible for our country to emerge stronger. We believed we could reverse the tide of outsourcing and draw new jobs to our shores. And over the past 5 years, our businesses have created more than 11 million new jobs. We believed we could reduce our dependence on foreign oil and protect our planet. And today, America is #1 in oil and gas. America is #1 in wind power. Every 3 weeks, we bring online as much solar power as we did in all of 2008. And thanks to lower gas prices and higher fuel standards, the typical family this year should save about $750 at the pump. We believed we could prepare our kids for a more competitive world. And today, our younger students have earned the highest math and reading scores on record. Our high school graduation rate has hit an all-time high. More Americans finish college than ever before. We believe that sensible regulations could prevent another crisis, shield families from ruin, and encourage fair competition. Today, we have new tools to stop taxpayer-funded bailouts and a new consumer watchdog to protect us from predatory lending and abusive credit card practices. And in the past year alone, about 10 million uninsured Americans finally gained the security of health coverage. At every step, we were told our goals were misguided or too ambitious, that we would crush jobs and explode deficits. Instead, we've seen the fastest economic growth in over a decade, our deficits cut by 2/3, a stock market that has doubled, and healthcare inflation at its lowest rate in 50 years. This is good news, people. So the verdict is clear. Middle-class economics works. Expanding opportunity works. And these policies will continue to work as long as politics don't get in the way. We can't slow down businesses or put our economy at risk with government shutdowns or fiscal showdowns. We can't put the security of families at risk by taking away their health insurance or unraveling the new rules on Wall Street or refighting past battles on immigration when we've got to fix a broken system. And if a bill comes to my desk that tries to do any of these things, I will veto it. It will have earned my veto. Today, thanks to a growing economy, the recovery is touching more and more lives. Wages are finally starting to rise again. We know that more small business owners plan to raise their employees' pay than at any time since 2007. But here's the thing. Those of us here tonight, we need to set our sights higher than just making sure government doesn't screw things up. The government doesn't halt the progress we're making. We need to do more than just do no harm. Tonight, together, let's do more to restore the link between hard work and growing opportunity for every American. Because families like Rebecca's still need our help. She and Ben are working as hard as ever, but they've had to forego vacations and a new car so that they can pay off student loans and save for retirement. Friday night pizza, that's a big splurge. Basic child care for Jack and Henry costs more than their mortgage and almost as much as a year at the University of Minnesota. Like millions of hardworking Americans, Rebecca isn't asking for a handout, but she is asking that we look for more ways to help families get ahead. And in fact, at every moment of economic change throughout our history, this country has taken bold action to adapt to new circumstances and to make sure everyone gets a fair shot. We set up worker protections, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, to protect ourselves from the harshest adversity. We gave our citizens schools and colleges, infrastructure, and the internet, tools they needed to go as far as their efforts and their dreams will take them. That's what middle-class economics is. The idea that this country does best when everyone gets their fair shot. Everyone does their fair share. Everyone plays by the same set of rules. We don't just want everyone to share in America's success, we want everyone to contribute to our success. So what does middle-class economics require in our time? First, middle-class economics means helping working families feel more secure in a world of constant change. It means helping folks afford childcare, college, health care, a home, retirement. And my budget will address each of these issues, lowering the taxes of working families and putting thousands of dollars back into their pockets each year. Here's one example. During World War II, when men like my grandfather went off to war, having women like my grandmother in the workforce was a national security priority. So this country provided universal child care. In today's economy, when having both parents in the workforce is an economic necessity for many families, we need affordable, high-quality child care more than ever. It's not a nice to have. It's a must-have. So it's time we stop treating childcare as a side issue or as a women's issue and treat it like the national economic priority that it is for all of us. And that's why my plan will make quality child care more available and more affordable for every middle-class and low-income family with young children in America, by creating more slots and a new tax cut of up to $3,000 per child per year. Here's another example. Today, we are the only advanced country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick leave or paid maternity leave to our workers. 43 million workers have no paid sick leave. 43 million. Think about that. And that forces too many parents to make the gut-wrenching choice between a paycheck and a sick kid at home. So I'll be taking new action to help states adopt paid leave laws of their own. And since paid sick leave won where it was on the ballot last November, let's put it to a vote right here in Washington. Send me a bill that gives every worker in America the opportunity to earn 7 days of paid sick leave. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Of course, nothing helps families make ends meet like higher wages. That's why this Congress still needs to pass a law that makes sure a woman is paid the same as a man for doing the same work. I mean, it's 2015. It's time. We still need to make sure employees get the overtime they've earned. And everyone in this Congress who still refuses to raise the minimum wage, I say this: if you truly believe you could work full-time and support a family on less than $15,000 a year, try it. If not, vote to give millions of the hardest working people in America a raise. Now, these ideas won't make everybody rich, won't relieve every hardship. That's not the job of government. To give working families a fair shot, we still need more employers to see beyond next quarter's earnings and recognize that investing in their workforce is in their company's long-term interest. We still need laws that strengthen rather than weaken unions and give American workers a voice. But, you know, things like child care and sick leave and equal pay, things like lower mortgage premiums and a higher minimum wage, these ideas will make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions of families. That's a fact. And that's what all of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, were sent here to do. And second, to make sure folks keep earning higher wages down the road, we have to do more to help Americans upgrade their skills. You know, America thrived in the 20th century because we made high school free, sent a generation of GIs to college, trained the best workforce in the world. We were ahead of the curve. But other countries caught on. And in a 21st century economy that rewards knowledge like never before, we need to up our game. We need to do more. By the end of this decade, 2 in 3 job openings will require some higher education. 2 in 3. And yet we still live in a country where too many bright, striving Americans are priced out of the education they need. It's not fair to them, and it's sure not smart for our future. And that's why I'm sending this Congress a bold new plan to lower the cost of community college to zero. Keep in mind, 40% of our college students choose community college. Some are young and starting out. Some are older and looking for a better job. Some are veterans and single parents trying to transition back into the job market. Whoever you are, this plan is your chance to graduate ready for the new economy without a load of debt. Understand, you've got to earn it. You've got to keep your grades up and graduate on time. Tennessee, a state with Republican leadership, and Chicago, a city with Democratic leadership, are showing that free community college is possible. I want to spread that idea all across America so that 2 years of college becomes as free and universal in America as high school is today. Let's stay ahead of the curve. And I want to work with this Congress to make sure those already burdened with student loans can reduce their monthly payments so that student debt doesn't derail anyone's dreams. Thanks to Vice President Biden's great work to update our job training system, we're connecting community colleges with local employers to train workers to fill high-paying jobs like coding and nursing and robotics. Tonight, I'm also asking more businesses to follow the lead of companies like CVS and UPS and offer more educational benefits and paid apprenticeships, opportunities that give workers the chance to earn higher-paying jobs even if they don't have a higher education. And as a new generation of veterans comes home, we owe them every opportunity to live the American dream they helped defend. Already, we've made strides towards ensuring that every veteran has access to the highest quality care. We're slashing the backlog that had too many veterans waiting years to get the benefits they need. And we're making it easier for vets to translate their training and experience into civilian jobs. And joining forces, the national campaign launched by Michelle and Jill Biden. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jill. Has helped nearly 700,000 veterans and military spouses get a new job. So to every CEO in America, let me repeat, if you want somebody who's going to get the job done and done right, hire a veteran. Finally, as we better train our workers, we need the new economy to keep churning out high-wage jobs for our workers to fill. Since 2010, America has put more people back to work than Europe, Japan, and all advanced economies combined. Our manufacturers have added almost 800,000 new jobs. Some of our bedrock sectors, like our auto industry, are booming. But there are also millions of Americans who work in jobs that didn't even exist 10 or 20 years ago. Jobs at companies like Google and eBay and Tesla. So no one knows for certain which industries will generate the jobs of the future. But we do know we want them here in America. We know that. And that's why the third part of middle-class economics is all about building the most competitive economy anywhere, the place where businesses want to locate and hire. 21st century businesses need 21st century infrastructure, modern ports and stronger bridges, faster trains, and the fastest internet. Democrats and Republicans used to agree on this. So let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline. Let's pass a bipartisan infrastructure plan that could create more than 30 times as many jobs per year and make this country stronger for decades to come. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. 21st century businesses, including small businesses, need to sell more American products overseas. Today, our businesses export more than ever, and exporters tend to pay their workers higher wages. But as we speak, China wants to write the rules for the world's fastest growing region. That would put our workers and our businesses at a disadvantage. Why would we let that happen? We should write those rules. We should level the playing field. That's why I'm asking both parties to give me trade promotion authority to protect American workers with strong new trade deals from Asia to Europe that aren't just free, but are also fair. It's the right thing to do. Look, I'm the first one to admit that past trade deals haven't always lived up to the hype. And that's why we've gone after countries that break the rules at our expense. But 95% of the world's customers live outside our borders. We can't close ourselves off from those opportunities. More than half of manufacturing executives have said they're actively looking to bring jobs back from China. So let's give them one more reason to get it done. 21st century businesses will rely on American science and technology, research and development. I want the country that eliminated polio and mapped the human genome to lead a new era of medicine, one that delivers the right treatment at the right time. In some patients with cystic fibrosis, this approach has reversed a disease once thought unstoppable. So tonight I'm launching a new precision medicine initiative to bring us closer to curing diseases like cancer and diabetes, and to give all of us access to the personalized information we need to keep ourselves and our families healthier. We can do this. I intend to protect a free and open internet, extend its reach to every classroom and every community, and help folks build the fastest networks so that the next generation of digital innovators and entrepreneurs have the platform to keep reshaping our world. I want Americans to win the race for the kinds of discoveries that unleash new jobs, converting sunlight into liquid fuel, creating revolutionary prosthetics so that a veteran who gave his arms for his country can play catch with his kids again. pushing out into the solar system, not just to visit, but to stay. Last month, we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. And in 2 months, to prepare us for those missions, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. So good luck, Captain. Make sure to Instagram it. We're proud of you. Now, the truth is, when it comes to issues like infrastructure and basic research, I know there's bipartisan support in this chamber. Members of both parties have told me so. Where we too often run onto the rocks is how to pay for these investments. As Americans, we don't mind paying our fair share of taxes as long as everybody else does too. But for far too long, lobbyists have rigged the tax code with loopholes that let some corporations pay nothing while others pay full freight. They've riddled it with giveaways that the super rich don't need while denying a break to middle-class families who do. This year we have an opportunity to change that. Let's close loopholes so we stop rewarding companies that keep profits abroad and reward those that invest here in America. Let's use those savings to rebuild our infrastructure and to make it more attractive for companies to bring jobs home. Let's simplify the system and let a small business owner file based on her actual bank statement instead of the number of accountants she can afford. And let's close the loopholes that lead to inequality by allowing the top 1% to avoid paying taxes on their accumulated wealth. We can use that money to help more families pay for childcare and send their kids to college. We need a tax code that truly helps working Americans trying to get a leg up in the new economy, and we can achieve that together. We can achieve it together. Helping hardworking families make ends meet. Giving them the tools they need for good-paying jobs in this new economy. Maintaining the conditions of growth and competitiveness. This is where America needs to go. I believe it's where the American people want to go. It'll make our economy stronger a year from now, 15 years from now, and deep into the century ahead. Of course, if there's one thing this new century has taught us, it's that we cannot separate our work here at home from challenges beyond our shores. My first duty as Commander-in-Chief is to defend the United States of America. In doing so, the question is not whether America leads in the world, but how. When we make rash decisions, reacting to the headlines instead of using our heads, when the first response to a challenge is to send in our military, then we risk getting drawn into unnecessary conflicts and neglect the broader strategy we need for a safer, more prosperous world. That's what our enemies want us to do. I believe in a smarter kind of American leadership. We lead best when we combine military power with strong diplomacy, when we leverage our power with coalition building, when we don't let our fears blind us to the opportunities that this new century presents. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And around the globe, it is making a difference. First, we stand united with people around the world who've been targeted by terrorists, from a school in Pakistan to the streets of Paris. We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks, and we reserve the right to act unilaterally, as we have done relentlessly since I took office, to take out terrorists who pose a direct threat to us and our allies. At the same time, we've learned some costly lessons over the last 13 years. Instead of Americans patrolling the valleys of Afghanistan, we've trained their security forces, who've now taken the lead. And we've honored our troops' sacrifice by supporting that country's first democratic transition. Instead of sending large ground forces overseas, we're partnering with nations from South Asia to North Africa to deny safe haven to terrorists who threaten America. In Iraq and Syria, American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance. Instead of getting dragged into another ground war in the Middle East, we are leading a broad coalition, including Arab nations, to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group. We're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort, and assisting people everywhere who stand up to the bankrupt ideology of violent extremism. Now, this effort will take time. It will require focus. But we will succeed. And tonight I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority. Second, we're demonstrating the power of American strength and diplomacy. We're upholding the principle that bigger nations can't bully the small by opposing Russian aggression and supporting Ukraine's democracy and reassuring our NATO allies. Last year, as we were doing the hard work of imposing sanctions, along with our allies, as we were reinforcing our presence with the frontline states, Mr. Putin's aggression, it was suggested, was a masterful display of strategy and strength. That's what I heard from some folks. Well, today, it is America that stands strong and united with our allies, while Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters. That's how America leads, not with bluster, but with persistent, steady resolve. You know, in Cuba, we are ending a policy that was long past its expiration date. When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. And our shift in Cuba policy has the potential to end a legacy of mistrust in our hemisphere. It removes a phony excuse for restrictions in Cuba, stands up for democratic values, and extends the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. And this year, Congress should begin the work of ending the embargo. You know, as His Holiness Pope Francis has said, diplomacy is the work of small steps. These small steps have added up to new hope for the future in Cuba. And after years in prison, we are overjoyed that Alan Gross is back where he belongs. Welcome home, Alan. We're glad you're here. Our diplomacy is at work with respect to Iran, where for the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress of its nuclear program and reduced its stockpile of nuclear material. Between now and this spring, we have a chance to negotiate a comprehensive agreement that prevents a nuclear-armed Iran, secures America and our allies, including Israel, while avoiding yet another Middle East conflict. There are no guarantees that negotiations will succeed. And I keep all options on the table to prevent a nuclear Iran. But new sanctions passed by this Congress at this moment in time will all but guarantee that diplomacy fails, alienating America from its allies, making it harder to maintain sanctions, and ensuring that Iran starts up its nuclear program again. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I will veto any new sanctions bill that threatens to undo this progress. The American people expect us only to go to war as a last resort. And I intend to stay true to that wisdom. Third, we're looking beyond the issues that have consumed us in the past to shape the coming century. No foreign nation, no hacker should be able to shut down our networks, steal our trade secrets, or invade the privacy of American families, especially our kids. So we're making sure our government integrates intelligence to combat cyber threats, just as we have done to combat terrorism. And tonight I urge this Congress to finally pass the legislation we need to better meet the evolving threat of cyber attacks, combat identity theft, and protect our children's information. That should be a bipartisan effort. If we don't act, we'll leave our nation and our economy vulnerable. If we do, we can continue to protect the technologies that have unleashed untold opportunities for people around the globe. In West Africa, our troops, our scientists, our doctors, our nurses, our healthcare workers are rolling back Ebola, saving countless lives and stopping the spread of disease. I could not be prouder of them. And I thank this Congress for your bipartisan support of their efforts. But the job is not yet done, and the world needs to use this lesson to build a more effective global effort to prevent the spread of future pandemics, invest in smart development, and eradicate extreme poverty. In the Asia-Pacific, we are modernizing alliances while making sure that other nations play by the rules in how they trade, how they resolve maritime disputes, how they participate in meeting common international challenges like nonproliferation and disaster relief. And no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. – 2014 was the planet's warmest year on record. Now, one year doesn't make a trend, but this does. 14 of the 15 warmest years on record have all fallen in the first 15 years of this century. I've heard some folks try to dodge the evidence by saying they're not scientists, that we don't have enough information to act. Well, I'm not a scientist either. But you know what? I know a lot of really good scientists at NASA and at NOAA and at our major universities. And the best scientists in the world are all telling us that our activities are changing the climate. And if we don't act forcefully, we'll continue to see rising oceans, longer, hotter heat waves, dangerous droughts and floods, and massive disruptions that can trigger greater migration and conflict and hunger around the globe. The Pentagon says that climate change poses immediate risks to our national security. We should act like it. And that's why over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we've set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. And that's why I will not let this Congress endanger the health of our children by turning back the clock on our efforts. I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got. And there's one last pillar of our leadership, and that's the example of our values. As Americans, we respect human dignity even when we're threatened, which is why I have prohibited torture and worked to make sure our use of new technology like drones is properly constrained. It's why we speak out against the deplorable anti-Semitism that has resurfaced in certain parts of the world. It's why we continue to reject offensive stereotypes of Muslims, the vast majority of whom share our commitment to peace. That's why we defend free speech and advocate for political prisoners and condemn the persecution of women or religious minorities or people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We do these things not only because they are the right thing to do, but because ultimately they will make us safer. As Americans, we have a profound commitment to justice. So it makes no sense to spend $3 million per prisoner to keep open a prison that the world condemns and terrorists use to recruit. Since I've been president, we've worked responsibly to cut the population of Gitmo in half. Now it is time to finish the job, and I will not relent in my determination to shut it down. It is not who we are. It's time to close Gitmo. As Americans, we cherish our civil liberties, and we need to uphold that commitment if we want maximum cooperation from other countries and industry in our fight against terrorist networks. So while some have moved on from the debates over our surveillance programs, I have not. As promised, our intelligence agencies have worked hard with the recommendations of privacy advocates to increase transparency and build more safeguards against potential abuse. And next month, we'll issue a report on how we're keeping our promise to keep our country safe while strengthening privacy. Looking to the future instead of the past. Making sure we match our power with diplomacy and use force wisely. Building coalitions to meet new challenges and opportunities. Leading always with the example of our values. That's what makes us exceptional. That's what keeps us strong. That's why we have to keep striving to hold ourselves to the highest of standards, our own. You know, just over a decade ago, I gave a speech in Boston where I said there wasn't a liberal America or a conservative America, a black America or a white America, but a United States of America. I said this because I had seen it in my own life, in a nation that gave someone like me a chance. Because I grew up in Hawaii, a melting pot of races and customs. Because I made Illinois my home, a state of small towns, rich farmland, one of the world's great cities, a microcosm of the country where Democrats and Republicans and independents, good people of every ethnicity and every faith, share certain bedrock values. Over the past 6 years, the pundits have pointed out more than once that my presidency hasn't delivered on this vision. How ironic, they say, that our politics seems more divided than ever. It's held up as proof, not just of my own flaws, of which there are many, but also as proof that the vision itself is misguided, naive, that there are too many people in this town who actually benefit from partisanship and gridlock for us to ever do anything about it. I know how tempting such cynicism may be, but I still think the cynics are wrong. I still believe that we are one people. I still believe that together we can do great things, even when the odds are long. I believe this because over and over in my 6 years in office, I have seen America at its best. I've seen the hopeful faces of young graduates from New York to California, and our newest officers at West Point, Annapolis, Colorado Springs, New London. I've mourned with grieving families in Tucson and Newtown, in Boston, in West Texas, and West Virginia. I've watched Americans beat back adversity from the Gulf Coast to the Great Plains, from Midwest assembly lines to the Mid-Atlantic seaboard. I've seen something like gay marriage go from a wedge issue used to drive us apart to a story of freedom across our country, a civil right now legal in states that 7 in 10 Americans call home. So I know the good and optimistic and big-hearted generosity of the American people, who every day live the idea that we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. And I know they expect those of us who serve here to set a better example. So the question for those of us here tonight is how we, all of us, can better reflect America's hopes. I've served in Congress with many of you. I know many of you well. There are a lot of good people here on both sides of the aisle. And many of you have told me that this isn't what you signed up for. Arguing past each other on cable shows, the constant fundraising, always looking over your shoulder at how the base will react to every decision. Imagine if we broke out of these tired old patterns. Imagine if we did something different. Understand, a better politics isn't one where Democrats abandon their agenda or Republicans simply embrace mine. A better politics is one where we appeal to each other's basic decency instead of our basest fears. A better politics is one where we debate without demonizing each other, where we talk issues and values and principles and facts rather than gotcha moments or trivial gaffes or fake controversies that have nothing to do with people's daily lives. A better politics is one where we spend less time drowning in dark money for ads that pull us into the gutter and spend more time lifting young people up with a sense of purpose and possibility, asking them to join in the great mission of building America. If we're going to have arguments, let's have arguments, but let's make them debates worthy of this body and worthy of this country. We still may not agree on a woman's right to choose, but surely we can agree it's a good thing that teen pregnancies and abortions are nearing all-time lows and that every woman should have access to the health care that she needs. Yes, passions still fly on immigration, but surely we can all see something of ourselves in the striving young student and agree that no one benefits when a hardworking mom is snatched from her child, and then it's possible to shape a law that upholds our tradition as a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats about that. That's something that we can share. We may go at it in campaign season, but surely we can agree that the right to vote is sacred, that it's being denied to too many, and that on this 50th anniversary of the Great March from Selma to Montgomery and the passage of the Voting Rights Act, we can come together, Democrats and Republicans, to make voting easier for every single American. We may have different takes on the events of Ferguson and New York, but surely we can understand a father who fears his son can't walk home without being harassed. And surely we can understand the wife who won't rest until the police officer she married walks through the front door at the end of his shift. And surely we can agree that it's a good thing that for the first time in 40 years, the crime rate and the incarceration rate have come down together. And use that as a starting point for Democrats and Republicans, community leaders and law enforcement to reform America's criminal justice system so that it protects and serves all of us. That's a better politics. That's how we start rebuilding trust. That's how we move this country forward. That's what the American people want. And that's what they deserve. I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them. My only agenda for the next 2 years is the same as the one I've had since the day I swore an oath on the steps of this Capitol: to do what I believe is best for America. If you share the broad vision I outlined tonight, I ask you to join me in the work at hand. If you disagree with parts of it, I hope you'll at least work with me where you do agree. And I commit to every Republican here tonight that I will not only seek out your ideas, I will seek to work with you to make this country stronger. Because I want this chamber, I want this city to reflect the truth that for all our blind spots and shortcomings, we are a people with the strength and generosity of spirit to bridge divides, to unite in common effort, to help our neighbors, whether down the street or on the other side of the world. I want our actions to tell every child in every neighborhood, your life matters. And we are committed to improving your life chances, as committed as we are to working on behalf of our own kids. I want future generations to know that we are a people who see our differences as a great gift, that we're a people who value the dignity and worth of every citizen. Man and woman, young and old, black and white, Latino, Asian, immigrant, Native American, gay, straight, Americans with mental illness or physical disability. Everybody matters. I want them to grow up in a country that shows the world what we still know to be true, that we are still more than a collection of red states and blue states, that we are the United States of America. I want them to grow up in a country where a young mom can sit down and write a letter to her president with a story that sums up these past 6 years. It's amazing what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who's made it through some very, very hard times. My fellow Americans, we too are a strong, tight-knit family. We too have made it through some hard times. 15 years into this new century, we have picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and begun again the work of remaking America. We have laid a new foundation. A brighter future is ours to write. Let's begin this new chapter together. And let's start the work right now. Thank you. God bless you. God bless this country we love. Thank you.
President Obama wrapping up his sixth State of the Union by going back to the future a bit. In a 60-minute speech ending by echoing the speech that first put him on the national stage back in 2004. He was the keynote speaker for John Kerry, the 2004 Democratic Convention, talking about a United States of America, not red states or blue states. Of course, that came after a very forceful laying out of a progressive agenda from a president who feels unfettered going into his final 2 years. Our John Karl covers the president from the White House in the chamber right now. We know he was speaking to the country. How did it play in the chamber?
George, this was a tough crowd. I've got to tell you, for most of the applause lines here, the Republican side of the chamber stayed seated. The Republicans didn't even stand up when the president said the State of the Union is strong. They, of course, applauded for the troops. They, of course, applauded a few other times, particularly when the president called for free trade. That was a time when the Democrats sat down. But, you know, this was about the most subdued inside the chamber State of the Union I have seen, because the Republicans were so quiet, and the Democratic side, which was enthusiastically applauding, was simply, not that big. But one other point here, George. The president mentioned the fact that he won 2 elections, but it's striking. He didn't mention the fact that he was coming into a chamber that the Republicans had just taken over the Senate.
Can I ask you about that, John? We couldn't tell from watching the feed. Maybe you could tell from inside. Was he speaking directly to a single person there, or just reacting to that applause?
It seemed like he was reacting to the scattered applause when he said, it's because I know because I won twice. Because there were several Republicans who were applauding at that point. It didn't seem to be to a particular person. But, what was striking is he didn't mention the words Mitch McConnell. Mm-hmm. If you remember, when the Republicans won the House, he made a point of reaching out to John Boehner, talking about this new speaker as the son of a barkeep and wanting to work with him. There was no mention of the fact that he was walking into a very different chamber than he's ever walked into before.
Matthew Dowd here in this chamber, as we see the president right there talking to some senators. It was striking, and you were pointing out as you were listening, almost like 2 different speeches stitched together.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The first speech was a speech which we thought he was going to give, which was selling the rise in the economy and proving that things are going well. I was struck, along with what John says, it was as if he never lost an election 2 months ago. It was giving a speech as if he had just won an election. Not that he had a more divided country, not that more Republicans were elected. He gave a speech without really any humility, which we talked about, but didn't even reflect on the fact that maybe he was part of the dysfunctional problem in Washington.
And a speech down in Brazil looking ahead to the next election.
Absolutely. George, look, Ronald Reagan in his sixth State of the Union didn't refer to the Democrats who had just won. George W. Bush didn't refer to the Democrats who had just taken over to the Senate. The president was talking to the country. He was talking about hope and opportunity and what he wants to do different in his next 2 years.
Nicole?
George Bush actually gave a beautiful tribute to the new speaker, Nancy Pelosi. He talked about her parents, how they never could have imagined her now as Speaker of the House. I think what's stunning to me I think this is who he was. We all sat around here watching it saying, this is the real President Obama. What's amazing to me is that nobody suggested or insisted that he sound a single grace note. He has presided over more electoral losses for Democrats than any president in history, and no one insisted that he offer a single olive branch to Republicans. He also said something in the first paragraph that sent a shiver up my spine. He talked about turning the page, and the context was the dawn of terror that hit our shores on September 11th. We started our newscast tonight with a story about ISIS. This speech is going to be overwhelmed and overcome and forgotten by this time tomorrow because of events.
The longest sustained applause when he talked about the 9/11 generation. I do want to go to Martha Raddatz, though, on that. Martha, he did make an explicit request to Congress asking for that authorization for the use of military force against ISIS. What are the prospects on Capitol Hill right now? I assume there's going to be some pretty heated debate over what to say about ground troops in that resolution.
Yeah, I think they'll want to see what the president puts on paper and how narrow this becomes. Although this has been an area of some bipartisan support. Let me mention Mitch McConnell, because he said there is a potential for agreement here. But George, I have to look at the liberal Democrats and think it would be very, very hard for some of them to authorize another war, no matter what the president says about limited engagement and that he doesn't want to send in a great deal of ground troops. It would still be a very, very hard vote for some.
Yeah, this will only pass with bipartisan support because he's not going to get all Democrats, not going to get all Republicans. On another foreign policy issue, Martha Raddatz, the president, making a forceful call to both Democrats and Republicans in that chamber: do not pass any legislation that would impose new sanctions on Iran while these negotiations are continuing.
They absolutely are dead set against that. They feel it will completely mess up these negotiations, even though what they want wouldn't take effect unless the negotiations fell apart. I believe the White House thinks that it shows unity of the nations involved in these negotiations. They do not want that to happen, and they would veto it.
President about to leave the chamber. Cokie Roberts, did you hear anything there where the president called for Democrats and Republicans to work together, aside from that authorization of force, that might actually happen this year?
No. He, at the end, he did talk about we don't have to be fighting each other all of the time, and this isn't the kind of politics Americans want, and that's true. It's not. We have a poll out this week showing 91%, pretty high, of the people say dysfunction in Washington is a problem. But this speech was all about a Democratic agenda and not really trying to get something done.
One possibility I did see Donna Brazoni bring up on this, even as I read a tweet that came in from Rand Paul. I think he was talking about the president's community college proposal, saying, Mr. President, you can't wave a magic wand, declare something free, someone has to pay for it. But Rand Paul has also spoken out on criminal justice issues, prison reform. That could be an area where you do see some bipartisan progress.
I do believe that's one area, the criminal justice reform, but also trade. I mean, that's an issue that Democrats don't really support, but I think in an effort to get some kind of progress with the Republicans on some big issues, he's going to strike a compromise on that in that area.
And Jon Karl, let me go back to you. We were talking here about the president, Nicole pointing out not showing any humility, no real concessions to the Republicans here. Bring us inside the thinking of the White House, the thinking of the president, as they've seen how everything has unfolded since this midterm election, since Election Day.
Well, they see a Republican majority that has no desire to work with him on any of these major issues. So they're saying that he's going to run the same play he ran last year when, look, even before the Republicans took over, there wasn't great prospects to get anything passed because of Republican control of the House. So he did his old pen in the phone. We're going to work through executive order. That's what he did on immigration. That's what he did on climate change. And their thinking is that's going to be the approach for the next 2 years as well.
That's what he did also on Cuba. But he did make a call, Jon Karl, for Congress to begin debating an end and a lifting to this embargo. And, of course, the president going to have his team in Cuba tomorrow negotiating.
That's right. And, he's got some interesting potential allies on the Republican side on this. Republican senators from farm states, including the two Kansas Republicans, have come out and said that they would like to see the embargo lifted at the very least on agricultural goods. There's a big movement in Iowa, by farm groups, to say we want that embargo lifted so we can sell our products to Cuba.
The problem for the president, Matthew Dowd, might be there may not be many more things he can do on his own, even though he's asking the bureaucracies to comb through every regulation, get rid of what they can get rid of.
Well, that's when he made that statement not long ago when he said, I have a pen and a phone. Well, the problem is he's running out of ink in the pen. And he doesn't seem to want to use the phone to call up the Republicans and say, let's cut a deal. The other thing, this speech is also given in the context, George, that the 2016 presidential race has already begun. And it's going to be very difficult for any Republicans and Hillary Clinton and her allies to seek agreement on anything. I think they want this debate about economic populism, wealth versus the middle class. That's the other thing about this that you were struck by. Even though the economy's improved, the president had to acknowledge in some ways that the middle class has not benefited from the growth of the economy.
Well, we just got a tweet from one of the potential candidates. We heard from Rand Paul. Now we've got one from Mitt Romney. This is just about a minute ago. True to form, the president in his State of the Union speech is more interested in politics than in leadership. Nicole Wallace, that sounds like a candidate.
Yes, as the politician. I think what's more interesting, I think Joni Ernst is going to address this in her response, is if he was serious about tax cuts for the middle class, he could have accomplished that in a comprehensive tax reform package. He had an ally in outgoing Senator Tom Coburn. There's nothing in this speech tonight that makes me concerned about Republican skepticism. Republicans are right to be skeptical, and the proof will be in the pudding. Tomorrow, no one will go to work on a single proposal from tonight's speech. Not Democrats, not Republicans.
Donna Brazil, one Democrat very happy tonight, Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely, because look, he was talking about issues that most Americans care about. The Republicans haven't really put forward any new interest in ideas in the past 2 weeks that they've been in control of Congress. Elizabeth Warren has championed the middle class, from debt relief for students to helping homeowners who are still struggling with their mortgage payments. Democrats are talking about issues that Republicans should finally embrace.
And we see the president there signing the tie. We think of a Senate page.
We hope.
As he's just about to leave the chamber. There he goes. Which means we will be back in a moment with a Republican response.
Next, the Republicans respond.
We are heading to Washington, and we are going to make them squeal.
What will the newest star of the GOP have to say? That's coming right up next.
Back now with our coverage of the State of the Union. Up next, the Republican response. It will be a newcomer. Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa, just elected back in November, former state senator, also member of the Army Reserves, served in Kuwait. And of course, she made such a splash. You saw that commercial as we were going to break, talking about castrating hogs and making them squeal in Washington as well. A fresh face, Nicole Wallace, for the Republicans.
She's the first woman ever sent to Washington from the state of Iowa. She was viewed as a candidate, as a potential rising star in the Republican Party. And I think the most powerful part of her response tonight might just be her personal story. That might be the thing that everyone remembers and is talking about a year from tonight.
Well, she'll be lucky, Cokie Roberts, if that is what people are talking about. Usually the speech ends up being noted for some kind of gaffe.
Some disaster. But, it is a losing situation. There's the President of the United States in the hall of the House of Representatives with everyone cheering, George Washington on one side, the Marquis de Lafayette on the other, and then it's some poor soul in a room with a teleprompter. So it's not an easy job for anyone, and we've certainly seen some people blow it. But it's smart of the Republicans to put her out there.
And she impressed a lot of people in that campaign. She'll be speaking from the Senate Armed Services Committee room. Here's Joni Ernst.
Good evening. I'm Joni Ernst. As a mother, a soldier, and a newly elected senator from the great state of Iowa, I am proud to speak with you tonight. A few moments ago, we heard the president lay out his vision for the year to come. Even if we may not always agree, it's important to hear different points of view in this great country. We appreciate the president sharing his. Tonight, though, rather than respond to a speech, I'd like to talk about your priorities. I'd like to have a conversation about the new Republican Congress you just elected and how we plan to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We heard the message you sent in November, loud and clear, and now we're getting to work to change the direction Washington has been taking our country. The new Republican Congress also understands how difficult these past 6 years have been. For many of us, the sting of the economy and the frustration with Washington's dysfunction weren't things we had to read about. We felt them every day. We felt them in Red Oak, the little town in southwestern Iowa where I grew up and am still proud to call home today. As a young girl, I plowed the fields of our family farm. I worked construction with my dad. To save for college, I worked the morning biscuit line at Hardee's. We were raised to live simply, not to waste. It was a lesson my mother taught me every rainy morning. You see, growing up, I had only one good pair of shoes. So on rainy school days, my mom would slip plastic bread bags over them to keep them dry. But I was never embarrassed because the school bus would be filled with rows and rows of young Iowans with bread bags slipped over their feet. Our parents may not have had much, but they worked hard for what they did have. These days, though, many families feel like they're working harder and harder with less and less to show for it, not just in Red Oak, but across the country. We see our neighbors agonize over stagnant wages and lost jobs. We see the hurt caused by canceled healthcare plans and higher monthly insurance bills. We see too many moms and dads put their own dreams on hold while growing more fearful about the kind of future they'll be able to leave to their children. Americans have been hurting, but when we demanded solutions too often, Washington responded with the same stale mindset that led to failed policies like Obamacare. It's a mindset that gave us political talking points, not serious solutions. That's why the new Republican majority you elected started by reforming Congress to make it function again. And now we're working hard to pass the kind of serious job creation ideas you deserve. One you've probably heard about is the Keystone Jobs Bill. President Obama has been delaying this bipartisan infrastructure project for years, even though many members of his party, unions, and a strong majority of Americans support it. The president's own State Department has said Keystone's construction could support thousands of jobs and pump billions into our economy and do it with minimal environmental impact. We worked with Democrats to pass this bill through the House. We're doing the same now in the Senate. President Obama will soon have a decision to make. Will he sign the bill or block good American jobs? There's a lot we can achieve if we work together. Let's tear down trade barriers in places like Europe and the Pacific. Let's sell more of what we make and grow in America over there so we can boost manufacturing wages and jobs right here at home. Let's simplify America's outdated and loophole-ridden tax code. Republicans think tax filing should be easier for you, not just the well-connected. So let's iron out loopholes to lower rates and create jobs, not pay for more government spending. The president has already expressed some support for these kinds of ideas. We're calling on him now to cooperate to pass them. You'll see a lot of serious work in this new Congress. Some of it will occur where I stand tonight, in the Armed Services Committee room. This is where I'll join committee colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to discuss ways to support our exceptional military and its mission. This is where we'll debate strategies to confront terrorism and the threats posed by Al-Qaeda, ISIL, and those radicalized by them. We know threats like these can't just be wished away. We've been reminded of terrorism's reach, both at home and abroad, most recently in France and Nigeria, but also in places like Canada and Australia. Our hearts go out to all the innocent victims of terrorism and their loved ones. We can only imagine the depth of their grief. For 2 decades, I've proudly worn our nation's uniform, today as a lieutenant colonel in the Iowa Army National Guard. While deployed overseas with some of America's finest men and women, I've seen just how dangerous these kinds of threats can be. The forces of violence and oppression don't care about the innocent. We need a comprehensive plan to defeat them. We must also honor America's veterans. These men and women have sacrificed so much in defense of our freedoms and our way of life. They deserve nothing less than the benefits they were promised and a quality of care we can all be proud of. These are important issues the new Congress plans to address. We'll also keep fighting to repeal and replace a health care law that's hurt so many hardworking families. We'll work to correct executive overreach. We'll propose ideas that aim to cut wasteful spending and balance the budget with meaningful reforms, not higher taxes like the president has proposed. We'll advance solutions to prevent the kind of cyber attacks we've seen recently. We'll work to confront Iran's nuclear ambitions. And we'll defend life because protecting our most vulnerable is an important measure of any society. Congress is back to work on your behalf, ready to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We know America faces big challenges, but history has shown there's nothing our nation and our people can't accomplish. Just look at my parents and grandparents. They had very little to call their own except the sweat on their brow and the dirt on their hands. But they worked, they sacrificed, and they dreamed big dreams for their children and grandchildren. And because they did, an ordinary Iowan like me has had some truly extraordinary opportunities because they showed me that you don't need to come from wealth or privilege to make a difference. You just need the freedom to dream big and a whole lot of hard work. The new Republican Congress you elected is working to make Washington understand that too. And with a little cooperation from the president, we can get Washington working again. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. May God bless this great country of ours, the brave Americans serving in uniform on our behalf, and you, the hardworking men and women who make the United States of America the greatest nation the world has ever known.
Senator Joni Ernst from Red Oak, Iowa. Forceful close to her speech there. The Republican response, speaking for the new Republican Congress, laying out their agenda for tonight as well. Very different from what we heard from the president, Matthew Dowd.
Well, we had a president who gave a Democratic speech who talked about bringing the country together, and then we have a Republican who gave a Republican speech who talked about bringing the country together. Both of them seemed at complete loggerheads talking right past each other. I mean, it's a tough environment, as Koki said, to be in and speak in that environment. She did the best she could first time on prime time, but it doesn't look like the Congress or the president seek any kind of resolution. One
place we could see some agreement, as we were talking about Martha Raddatz and listening to this member of the Armed Services Committee, that authorization of force on ISIL.
Yeah, I think we could definitely see some bipartisan support for that authorization of military force. They have talked about it before. They want something on their desk, and it depends on how narrow that is, but you could see something, although, again, those liberal Democrats might have a very, very hard time authorizing another war, even though we seem to be in the middle of one already.
Koki Roberts, as you were pointing out, the speech, high degree of difficulty. She did about as well as you can do.
I think she did just fine. She was clearly nervous. Why not? And we all would be. But you know, the Republicans have a traditional problem with women. She was a forceful woman in a good position.
Nicole?
I think we're going to see a lot more of her. She's on the Armed Services Committee. I think she'll become an increasingly credible and powerful voice for the Republicans.
So the battle lines have been drawn tonight. We've heard from the president. We've heard from the Republicans. The debates begin in Congress across the country tomorrow. I do want to thank our entire team for coming in tonight. Thank all of you for joining us. We're going to have more analysis right now on abcnews.com and on Nightline later. I'll see you tomorrow on GMA. Vice President Biden will be our guest. Have a good night.
This has been a special presentation of ABC News.